Now you can see what I've got on the slide, the aim. This is actually straight from this syllabus. So it's just talking about what P4 is about. So applying relevant knowledge, skills, and exercise professional judgment as expected of a senior financial executive or advisor. So basically, you think about what does a finance director do? Well, they're responsible for things like raising capital for the business. They're possibly responsible for the Treasury function and these types of things. And what P4 is doing is looking at the advanced theory behind their job. And as you can see, there is a link with, it says P9 there, sorry, that should be F9. It builds on knowledge from paper F9, the fundamental paper. So if you did F9 and you liked F9, then possibly you might consider P4. Now, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about the syllabus. So just go through what I consider to be the highlights of the syllabus for P4. Obviously, I'm not going to go through the syllabus in detail here, but just talk about what are the big areas, if you like. Okay, section A of the syllabus talks about the role and responsibility towards stakeholders. Now, there's quite a lot in here which you will already be aware of from paper P1. All this stuff about stakeholder considerations and environmental issues. That actually tends to come up in all P-level papers because the ACCA are very keen on stakeholders and ethics. But as far as P4 is concerned, we also have a bit more of a slant into capital structure and dividend policy, because that's really something which the finance director or the finance department is particularly concerned with, which is relevant towards the stakeholders. So that's section A. Now, section A isn't really the most important part of the syllabus for P4. So we then come on to part B. Now, part B, we're looking at the environment within which multinational organizations operate and how that environment may impact on the work of the finance department. Now, the first thing is we need to understand how we can manage our organization within such an environment. I mean, for example, we may be operating in one country where that country has restrictions on payment of dividends. So as good finance people, it's useful if we can find ways to get around those dividend restrictions, for example. So when we're talking about managing international organizations, it's considerations such as that we're interested in. It also deals with a sort of theoretical knowledge of international bodies such as the World Trade Organization, the IMF, the World Bank, and so on. How do all of these organizations impact on the work of a multinational? And also included in there is transfer pricing, because of course big multinational companies may use transfer pricing as a way to reduce their overall taxation. Okay, continuing with the syllabus for P4, part C. Now we're really getting into the meat of the paper at this point, advanced investment appraisal. Now obviously this builds on the F9 knowledge, and you'll be already familiar with discounted cash flow calculations from paper F9. Well, clearly at P4 level, those calculations are going to be more complicated than they were at F9. But in addition, in F9 you were always told, weren't you, what the discount factor is when you did your discounted cash flow calculations. At P4 level, you may well have to calculate what the discount rate is using one of the many theories about cost of capital. Also in section C, we've got something about option pricing. So we've got the Black-Scholes option pricing model. Sounds fairly scary. It's actually not that scary, to be honest, because all you may be asked to do in the exam is to discuss the option pricing model, talk about the variables within it, and possibly to apply it. Well, you're actually given the formula for the Black-Scholes model in the exam, so it's not quite as scary as it sounds, but it is fairly, fairly involved maths. And then some other methods of investment appraisal. So, in particular, free cash flows, adjusted value, And again, we also talk in this area about theories about the cost of capital. Now again, those of you who did F9, which probably is most of you, may remember that in F9 you talk quite a lot about Modigliani and Miller's theories about cost of capital. So those are all relevant here, and we'll get one or two other theories as well. Okay, then going to part D of the syllabus, acquisitions and mergers. Okay, well, there's discussion about why we have mergers and acquisitions, which you may well be familiar with if you can remember what you did in paper P3, hopefully not so long ago. So there will be some discussion there, which will be similar to P3 stuff. But at P4 level, there's likely to be more calculations than in P3. So you may well be talking about things like valuing targets. So there's some company valuation here. Financing acquisitions. Where are you going to get the money from to buy that other company? Are you going to pay in cash? Are you going to issue shares? And these kinds of considerations. So again, section D is another core part of the syllabus for P4. Then we go on to section E of the syllabus. Now, E is a slightly smaller part of the syllabus, not such a core part if you like, and that deals with corporate restructuring. Now, restructuring is basically where an organisation gets into trouble and they decide that the only way to get out of trouble is to restructure, which may involve selling off part of the business. It may involve restructuring the capital. So it is possible that you may be asked to suggest a restructuring, but it's more likely that in a question the examiner will actually talk about a restructuring that's already been designed and ask you to discuss how the different parties might react to that restructuring. And then related to restructuring is something called unbundling, which is where an organisation decides to spin off a part of their organisation. So, it could be a particular division or a particular product line. So, talking about the issues surrounding there. Okay, we're getting towards the end now. So, the end of the syllabus for P4, that is. We then have section F, which is again rather difficult. This is dealing with hedging and risk analysis. And within this section, we talk a lot about derivatives and how derivatives can be used for hedging. Now again, that was an area which was touched on in paper F9, but at paper P4, we would look at that in more detail. There may well be calculations involving derivatives where you have to calculate how successful a hedge was. Now, the examiner will give you information about the cost of the various derivative instruments. And when we talk about hedging, of course, we're talking about hedging for either interest rate risk, where we borrowed or lent money, or it could also be to do with exchange, foreign currency risk as well, so how we can hedge for those things. So that's another big part of the syllabus, part F. And then finally, the last part of the syllabus, we tend to have a part like this in all P levels, actually, a sort of emerging issues part of the syllabus where we just talk about the latest developments within the science. And in the case of P4, we're talking about developments in markets, developments in stock markets and so on. And in addition, Islamic financing, that's something which has been introduced into the syllabus very recently. So that's an emerging issue. So that's a sort of overview of the syllabus.